The full moon hung suspended in the sky like a watching eye, casting silver light across the desolate mountains. Nisara Thornwick stood at the mouth of the tomb, her white hair catching the lunar glow like threads of starlight against the crimson silk of her dress. The wind whispered warnings through the ancient stones, but she did not hear them. Her pale fingers traced the intricate runes carved deep into the threshold, symbols that pulsed with a light that seemed to come from somewhere beyond this world. She had studied dead languages her entire life, but these markings were different. They were alive. They were screaming. She did not know that with every symbol she deciphered, she was unraveling chains that had held for 333 years. She did not know that behind the sealed stone, something immortal was waiting. She only knew that knowledge should never remain buried, that truth deserved to breathe, no matter how dangerous it might be. The final rune glowed beneath her touch, hot as a brand. Nisara whispered the ancient word, her voice steady despite the trembling in her chest. For a moment, nothing happened. The mountain held its breath. Then the earth beneath her feet began to shake. The tomb doors exploded outward with a sound like the world splitting open. Nisara was thrown backward, her body hitting the stone ground hard enough to steal the air from her lungs. Dust and debris filled the air, choking and blinding. When it cleared, she looked up and saw him. Uldric Dravenmore emerged from the darkness like a god of wrath and shadow. He was impossibly tall, his body carved with muscle that spoke of centuries of battle and dominance. Long black hair fell past his shoulders, wild and untamed, framing a face that was both beautiful and terrifying. His beard was thick, dark, giving him the appearance of a warrior from a forgotten age. But it was his eyes that stopped her heart. They burned with an amber light, fierce and ancient. Eyes that had seen empires rise and fall. Eyes that had been closed for longer than most mortals lived. He stepped into the moonlight, chains of runic magic still dissolving from his wrists and ankles like smoke. His chest heaved as he drew his first breath of freedom, and the sound was almost a growl. The raw power emanating from him made the air itself feel heavy, oppressive. Nisara's instincts screamed at her to run, but her body would not obey. She could only stare as the Alpha King scanned his surroundings, taking in a world he no longer recognized. Then his gaze fell upon her. Uldric moved with predatory grace, closing the distance between them in seconds. He stood over her, a mountain of fury and confusion, and when he spoke, his voice was like thunder rolling across a barren plain. "Who dares wake me from my eternal sleep?" Nisara forced herself to her feet, ignoring the pain in her ribs. She met his burning gaze with her own, pale blue eyes reflecting moonlight and defiance. Her voice, when it came, was steadier than she felt. "I am Nisara Thornwick, scholar of the ancient languages. I did not know this tomb held a living soul. I sought only to understand the runes." Uldric studied her with an intensity that made her feel exposed, as if he could see through flesh and bone to the truth beneath. His nostrils flared, catching her scent on the wind. Something flickered in his expression, too quick to name. 333 years, he said, his voice dropping to something quieter, more dangerous. "I have been trapped in darkness for 333 years. And you freed me because you were curious?" "I freed you because knowledge should not be buried," Nisara replied, lifting her chin. "Whatever you are, whoever you were, the world has forgotten you. Your tomb was discovered 3 weeks ago by miners. If I had not come, others would have. Scholars with less skill, soldiers with darker purposes." The Alpha King's jaw clenched, muscles working beneath his beard. He turned away from her, surveying the landscape with eyes that saw only devastation. The kingdom he remembered, the forests and cities that had once stretched as far as the eye could see, were gone. In their place stood unfamiliar structures, roads that led to places he did not know, and a silence where there should have been life. "What has become of my kingdom?" The The question emerged as barely more than a whisper, but it carried the weight of centuries of loss. Before we continue with the story, I want to thank everyone who supports the channel and loves our Alpha King romances. In the pinned comment, you'll find a special selection of the best Amazon audiobooks that inspire our stories. If you purchase any audiobook through those links, you'll be directly supporting the channel and helping us create more stories. Tell us where you're watching from and how old you are in the comments. I hope you enjoy the story. Nisara hesitated. She had read the legends, the fragmented histories that spoke of the last Alpha King. A ruler so powerful that even death could not claim him. So dangerous that his own people had chosen to seal him away rather than execute him. The stories painted him as a monster, a tyrant whose hunger for power had threatened to consume everything. But the man standing before her, lost and grieving for a world that no longer existed, did not seem like a monster. "Your kingdom fell long ago," she said gently. "The bloodline that ruled after you claimed you were a false king, a pretender who seized power through dark magic. They erased your name from history, rewrote the records. I know you only as the sealed one, the king too dangerous to be remembered." Uldric's hands curled into fists, and the air around him seemed to crackle with barely contained power. For a moment, Nisara thought he might unleash his rage upon her, might tear apart the mountain itself in his fury. But instead, he threw back his head and laughed. It was a bitter, broken sound that echoed through the empty night. "Betrayed even in death," he said. "My own blood turned against me. How fitting." "I can help you," Nisara heard herself say, the words escaping before wisdom could stop them. "I know this world. I know its languages, its politics, its secrets. If what you say is true, if you were wrongly imprisoned, then there may be proof hidden in the old texts. I can find it." Uldric turned to her slowly, his amber eyes narrowing. "Why would you help me? You know nothing of me. You should fear me." "Perhaps I should," Nisara admitted, "but I have spent my life searching for truth in a world built on lies. If your story has been buried, then I want to uncover it. Besides, you need me. This world is not the one you left. Without guidance, you will be lost, vulnerable, and I suspect there are those who will not be pleased to learn you have awakened." The Alpha King regarded her for a long moment, and something shifted in his expression. It was subtle, a softening around his eyes, a slight relaxation in the set of his shoulders. When he spoke again, his voice had lost some of its sharp edge. "You are either very brave or very foolish, Nisara Thornwick, but you speak truth. I am a king without a kingdom, a warrior in an unfamiliar land. Very well. I accept your offer. But know this. If you betray me, if this is some elaborate trap, I will show you why they feared me enough to seal me in stone." "Understood," Nisara said, extending her hand. "We have an agreement then." Uldric stared at her outstretched hand as if it were a foreign object. Then, slowly, he reached out and clasped it in his own. His hand was massive, rough with calluses, and warm with a heat that seemed to radiate from his very core. The touch sent an unexpected jolt through Nisara's body, something electric and primal that made her breath catch. The Alpha King felt it too. His eyes widened fractionally, his grip tightening just slightly before he released her. He stepped back, his expression guarded once more. "We should leave this place," Nisara said, forcing her voice to remain steady. "There will be others coming. The excavation team will return at dawn, and they will not react kindly to finding the tomb opened, and you standing free." "Where would we go?" Uldric asked, glancing around at the unfamiliar landscape. "I have a cottage in the Grey Valleys, 3 days' journey from here. It is remote, protected by wards I have inscribed myself. We can go there, regroup, plan our next move. I have extensive archives, maps, histories. Everything you need to understand what has happened in your absence." Uldric nodded slowly. "Lead the way, scholar. I will follow." They descended from the mountain under the watchful gaze of the moon, two figures moving through shadows that seemed to bend and whisper around them. Nisara led, her red dress a splash of color against the gray stone, while Uldric moved behind her like a silent guardian, his presence both comforting and unnerving. As they walked, Nisara became acutely aware of him. The way he moved, fluid and powerful despite his size. The way his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, alert to every sound, every shift in the wind. He was a predator, honed by centuries of survival, and she was walking alone with him through the wilderness. Yet she did not feel afraid. Instead, she felt something she had not experienced in years. She felt protected. They made camp as the first light of dawn began to touch the horizon. Nisara had brought supplies in her pack, provisions for a journey she had expected to make alone. She built a small fire while Uldric stood watch, his silhouette dark against the growing light. "You should rest," he said without turning. "I will keep watch." "You have been asleep for over 3 centuries, Nisara replied, unpacking bread and dried meat. "Surely you need rest more than I do." "I have had enough sleep to last 1,000 lifetimes," Uldric said, and there was a hollowness in his voice that made her chest ache. "I do not wish to close my eyes again. Not yet." Nisara understood. She set aside the food and moved to stand beside him, looking out at the landscape he no longer recognized. For a while, they stood in silence, two souls bound by chance and circumstance, watching the sun rise on a world that belonged to neither of them. "Tell me about yourself," Uldric said suddenly. "You know my story, or at least the lies they tell about me. What of you? Why does a young woman dedicate her life to deciphering dead languages and exploring forgotten tombs?" Nisara smiled sadly. "Because the dead cannot lie. The living twist truth to suit their needs, but the past, when properly read, reveals itself honestly. I was orphaned young, raised by scholars in the Grey Archives. I learned that knowledge is the only power that cannot be taken from you, the only legacy that endures. I suppose I became what I was taught to value." "You are alone," Uldric observed. It was not a question. "Yes. I have colleagues, acquaintances, but no true connections. My work requires solitude, and I have grown comfortable with it. Or perhaps I have simply grown used to it." The Alpha King turned to look at her, and in the pale morning light, his features seemed less harsh, more human. "I understand loneliness. I ruled a kingdom, commanded armies, and yet I was utterly alone. Power isolates. People feared me, desired me, but none truly knew me. My imprisonment was merely a different form of the solitude I had always known." Their eyes met, and in that moment, something passed between them. A recognition, a shared understanding of what it meant to be powerful and yet profoundly isolated. Nisara felt her heart beat faster, felt a warmth bloom in her chest that had nothing to do with the rising sun. "Perhaps we are not so different, you and I," she said softly. "Perhaps not," Uldric agreed, his voice equally quiet. The moment stretched between them, fragile and tentative. Then Uldric looked away, his jaw tightening as if he were fighting some internal battle. "You should eat and rest. We have a long journey ahead." Nisara nodded and returned to the fire, but she could feel his presence like a weight against her back, warm and constant. As she ate, she found herself stealing glances at him, studying the way the morning light caught in his dark hair, the proud line of his shoulders, the careful way he held himself, as if afraid his power might slip free and cause harm. She thought about the legends, the stories of the terrible Alpha King. But the man she had freed did not match those tales. He was fierce, yes. Dangerous, certainly. But he was also careful with her. Respectful. almost gentle in a way that seemed at odds with his fearsome appearance. Sleep took her eventually, and when she dreamed, it was of amber eyes and ancient tombs, of runic chains breaking and darkness giving way to light. She woke to find Uldric watching her, his expression unreadable. The sun had climbed higher, marking several hours past. "You should have woken me," she said, sitting up and brushing leaves from her hair. "You needed rest, and I found I enjoyed the quiet. It has been a long time since I could simply exist without the weight of a kingdom on my shoulders." They continued their journey, traveling through forests that Uldric claimed were once great cities, across rivers that had changed their courses, through valleys that had been mountains in his time. With every step, the Alpha King grew quieter, the magnitude of his loss settling over him like a shroud. Nisara found herself wanting to comfort him, to ease the pain she saw in his eyes. She told him stories of the current world, explained the political structures, the wars that had been fought, the peace that had been won. She spoke of art and science, of the discoveries that had been made in his absence. And slowly, gradually, she saw him begin to engage, to ask questions, to show interest in this strange new era. On the second night, as they sat by the fire, Uldric spoke of his past. He told her of his rise to power, of the enemies he had defeated, the alliances he had forged. He spoke of his family, the betrayal that had led to his imprisonment. His voice was steady, but Nisara could hear the grief beneath it, the rage carefully controlled. "They said I sought to make myself immortal," he said, staring into the flames. "They said I practiced dark magic, that I would sacrifice my own people for eternal life. It was a lie. I was researching ancient magic, yes, but not for immortality. I sought to strengthen our defenses, to protect my kingdom from external threats. But my cousin, my most trusted advisor, he twisted my research, planted evidence, convinced the council that I was a danger. They sealed me alive in that tomb, left me conscious and aware in the darkness for over 3 centuries. Nisara's hand moved of its own accord, reaching out to touch his arm. Uldric flinched at the contact, his eyes snapping to hers, but he did not pull away. "I am sorry," she said. "No one deserves that fate." "Do you believe me?" he asked, his voice rough. "You have only my word against centuries of history." "I believe you," Nisara said without hesitation, "because I have seen how they rewrite history to suit their needs. And because, if you were truly the monster they claimed, I would not be sitting here unharmed, speaking with you as an equal." Something cracked in Uldric's expression, a wall crumbling. He turned his hand over, his palm facing up, and Nisara understood the invitation. She placed her hand in his, and his fingers closed around hers, gentle despite their strength. "Thank you," he said simply. They sat like that for a long time, hands joined, the fire crackling between them and the stars wheeling overhead. Nisara felt something shifting inside her, something she had kept locked away for years. The careful distance she maintained from all people was eroding in the face of this ancient king's vulnerability. She had thought herself content with solitude, but now she wondered if she had simply been afraid. Afraid of connection, of loss, of the pain that comes with caring for another. But looking at Uldric, seeing the strength and sorrow in his eyes, she found that fear mattered less than the pull she felt toward him. It was not simply attraction, though she could not deny the way her body responded to his presence. It was deeper, more profound. A recognition of kindred spirits, 2 souls shaped by isolation and loss, finding unexpected solace in each other. When they finally released hands and settled to sleep, Nisara lay awake for a long time, acutely aware of Uldric's presence just a few feet away. She wondered if he felt it too, this strange connection forming between them. She wondered if he lay awake thinking of her as she thought of him. The third day of their journey brought them to the Grey Valleys, a landscape of mist-shrouded hills and ancient forests. Nisara's cottage sat nestled in a clearing, a modest structure of stone and wood, surrounded by protective wards that shimmered faintly in the fading light. "This is your home?" Uldric asked, studying the building with interest. "It is not much, but it serves my needs, and it is well protected. The wards will alert me to any approach, and the archives within hold knowledge few others possess." She led him inside, and Uldric had to duck to pass through the doorway. The interior was cozy, lined with shelves overflowing with books and scrolls. A large table dominated the center of the main room, covered with maps and documents. A fire pit sat ready for lighting, and a narrow staircase led to a loft above. "Make yourself comfortable," Nisara said, moving to light the fire. "I will prepare food, and then we can begin researching your case." Uldric moved through the space carefully, as if afraid his size might damage something. He studied the books, running his fingers over spines written in languages both familiar and foreign. When he spoke, his voice was tinged with wonder. "You have texts here from the Old Kingdom. I recognize these symbols. Some of these books were written during my reign." Nisara looked up from the fire, surprised. "Truly? I acquired many of these from ruins and forgotten libraries. If you can read them, they might contain evidence we need." "Show me what you have on the royal lineage," Uldric said, his focus sharpening. "If I can prove the betrayal, prove that my imprisonment was unjust, then perhaps I can reclaim what was stolen." They worked late into the night, poring over ancient texts and fragmented histories. Uldric read passages aloud, translating symbols Nisara had spent years struggling to decipher. His knowledge was vast, his memory sharp despite the centuries of darkness. As he worked, Nisara watched him, fascinated by the intensity in his eyes, the careful precision of his movements. She brought him food, and he ate absently, too focused on the work to pay attention to sustenance. She smiled at that, recognizing the same single-minded dedication she herself possessed when deep in research. They were alike in more ways than she had initially realized. It was past midnight when Uldric suddenly sat back, a heavy tome open before him. His expression was grave. "I have found it," he said quietly. "The evidence I needed." Nisara moved to stand beside him, reading over his shoulder. The text was a private journal, written by one of Uldric's council members. It detailed the conspiracy against him, the manufactured evidence, the manipulation of public fear. It named his cousin, Aldrich Dravenmore, as the architect of the betrayal. "This changes everything," Nisara breathed. "With this, you can prove your innocence. But Uldric, if your cousin orchestrated this, who rules now? His descendants?" Uldric's jaw clenched. "Most likely. The Dravenmore name would have endured. They would have built their legitimacy on the lie of my tyranny." He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the stone floor. "I must reclaim my throne. I must expose the truth and restore my name." "That will not be simple," Nisara warned. "The current rulers will not surrender power willingly. You will need more than evidence. You will need allies, resources, a strategy." "Then we will find them," Uldric said, turning to face her. "You have given me hope, Nisara. You have given me purpose beyond mere survival. I will not ask you to continue risking yourself for my cause, but I would be honored if you chose to stand with me." Nisara met his gaze steadily. "I freed you from that tomb. I will see this through to the end. Besides, you need someone who understands this world. You need me." A slow smile spread across Uldric's face, the first genuine smile she had seen from him. It transformed his features, softening the harsh lines, revealing a warmth that took her breath away. "Yes," he said. "I do need you." The admission hung in the air between them, heavy with implications neither was quite ready to explore. Nisara felt heat rise to her cheeks, felt her heart hammering against her ribs. She turned away, busying herself with organizing the scattered texts. "We should rest," she said, her voice not quite steady. "Tomorrow we begin planning." "Where shall I sleep?" Uldric asked, looking around the small cottage. "The loft is mine, but there is a bedroll I can prepare for you by the fire. I apologize for the modest accommodations. After 300 years on cold stone, anything is luxury," Uldric said. "Thank you, Nisara, for everything." She prepared his sleeping space while he stood at the window, looking out at the moonlit valley. When she finished, she moved toward the stairs, intending to retreat to the safety of her loft. But Uldric's voice stopped her. "Nisara." She turned. He was watching her with an intensity that made her knees weak. "I want you to know that I see you. Not as a tool to use, not as a means to an end. I see your strength, your intelligence, your kindness. You could have left me in that tomb, could have run when I emerged. But you stayed. You helped. You are remarkable." Tears pricked at Nisara's eyes, unexpected and overwhelming. No one had ever spoken to her like that, had ever truly seen her beyond her usefulness. She swallowed hard, searching for words. "You are not the monster they claimed," she managed. "You are a good man, Uldric Dravenmore, and I am glad I freed you." She fled up the stairs before he could respond, her emotions too raw to trust herself. In the privacy of her loft, she pressed her hands to her hot cheeks, trying to calm her racing heart. Below, she heard Uldric moving about, settling into his bedroll. She lay in her own bed, staring at the ceiling, knowing sleep would be long in coming. What was happening to her? She had spent years building walls around her heart, protecting herself from the pain of connection. But Uldric was dismantling those defenses with every word, every look, every moment of unexpected gentleness. She was falling for him, this ancient king with amber eyes and a wounded soul, and she had no idea how to stop it, or if she even wanted to. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. They rose with the sun, shared simple meals, and spent hours researching, planning, preparing for the confrontation to come. Nisara taught Uldric about the modern world, its technologies and customs, while he shared stories of the old ways, of magic and honor that had been lost to time, and slowly, carefully, they grew closer. It was in the small things, the way Uldric would bring her tea when she became too absorbed in her work, the way Nisara would leave books she thought might interest him on the table, the accidental brushes of hands when reaching for the same scroll, the lingering looks across the fire at night. Uldric was changing. The harsh, angry king who had emerged from the tomb was softening, revealing layers of warmth and humor beneath the warrior's exterior. With Nisara, he laughed. He teased. He showed a gentleness that contrasted starkly with his fearsome appearance. But she also saw the other side of him, the alpha who could freeze men with a look, whose mere presence commanded respect and fear. He was a study in contrasts, and she found herself fascinated by every facet of his complex nature. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Uldric spoke of his plans. "I cannot simply march to the capital and demand my throne. I need to build support, prove my legitimacy. The lords of the outlying territories, those who might remember the old ways, they could be allies." "There are rumors," Nisara said carefully. "Stories of noble houses who still practice the old traditions in secret, who question the legitimacy of the current king. If we could reach them, convince them of your identity and your cause, they might support you." "It would be dangerous," Uldric warned. "Those in power will not tolerate a threat. If they learn I have awakened, they will send armies to kill me, or worse, seal me away again. Then we move carefully. We use the shadows. We build our strength before revealing ourselves." Uldric looked at her with admiration. "You would make an excellent strategist, scholar. Has anyone ever told you that? I have spent my life reading about wars and politics. I suppose some of it has rubbed off on me. It is more than that, Uldric said, leaning forward. You have a keen mind, a strategic instinct. You see patterns, anticipate moves. You would have been invaluable in my counsel. Nisara felt warmth spread through her chest at his praise. I am valuable to you now, she said softly. More than you know, Uldric replied, his voice dropping to something intimate. You have become essential to me, Nisara. Not just for your knowledge, but for your presence. You have brought light to a darkness I thought would consume me. Her breath caught. They were sitting close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, could see the flecks of gold in his amber eyes. Her heart pounded so loudly she was certain he could hear it. Uldric, she whispered, uncertain what she meant to say. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently cupped her face in his large hand. His touch was impossibly tender, at odds with the calluses and strength she could feel there. Tell me to stop, he said, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. Tell me you do not feel this connection between us, and I will never speak of it again. Nisara could have lied. She could have protected herself, maintained the careful distance she had always kept. But she was tired of being alone, tired of walls and fear. And she wanted this, wanted him, with an intensity that frightened and exhilarated her. I cannot tell you that, she said, her voice barely audible, because it would be a lie. Uldric's eyes blazed with something fierce and possessive. He leaned in slowly, his other hand coming up to frame her face, cradling her as if she were something precious and fragile. When his lips met hers, it was with a gentleness that made her heart ache. The kiss was slow, exploratory, a question being asked and answered. Nisara's hands came up to rest against his chest, feeling the powerful beat of his heart beneath her palms. Uldric made a low sound in his throat, something between a growl and a sigh, and deepened the kiss. Heat flooded through Nisara's body, igniting something primal and wild within her. She had never been kissed like this, had never felt such a perfect blend of tenderness and passion. Uldric kissed her as if she were air, and he had been suffocating, as if she were a treasure he had searched for across centuries. When they finally parted, both breathing hard, Uldric rested his forehead against hers. You undo me, he said, his voice rough. I thought myself beyond such feelings, thought my heart had turned to stone in that tomb. But you have awakened more than just my body, Nisara. You have awakened my soul. Tears slipped down Nisara's cheeks, and Uldric kissed them away with infinite care. I am yours, she said, the words emerging with certainty. Whatever comes, wherever this leads, I am yours, and I am yours, Uldric vowed. For as long as I draw breath, I will protect you, cherish you, stand beside you. You are mine, Nisara Thornwick, and I will let no harm come to you. They held each other in the firelight, two souls who had been alone for so long, finally finding home in each other's arms. Outside, the wind whispered through the valleys, and the stars turned in their endless dance. But inside the cottage, time seemed to stand still, holding this moment sacred. That night, Nisara did not retreat to her loft. She stayed by the fire, wrapped in Uldric's embrace, feeling safe and whole for the first time in her life. They spoke in whispers, sharing secrets and dreams, learning the contours of each other's hearts. And when sleep finally claimed them, it was peaceful, unmarred by nightmares or loneliness. The next morning brought reality crashing back. A knock at the door startled them both awake. Uldric was on his feet instantly, his entire demeanor shifting from gentle lover to dangerous predator. He positioned himself between Nisara and the door, every muscle tensed for battle. Nisara moved to the window, peering out carefully. "It is Aldrin, one of the scholars from the excavation team. He must have tracked me here." "Does he know about me?" Uldric asked, his voice low and deadly. "I do not know, but we cannot hide forever. This was always going to happen." Uldric nodded grimly. "Stay behind me." Nisara opened the door to find Aldrin, a thin man with nervous eyes, standing on her threshold. His gaze widened when he saw Uldric looming behind her. "Nisara," Aldrin said, his voice shaking slightly. "Thank the gods you are safe. When we found the tomb opened and you gone, we feared the worst. Who is this?" "A friend," Nisara said carefully. "He is helping me with my research." Aldrin's eyes narrowed, studying Uldric with growing suspicion. "He looks like the carvings in the tomb." "Nisara, what have you done?" "I have done what I always do," she replied evenly. "I have uncovered the truth." "The tomb was a prison," Aldrin hissed, stepping back. "You have released something dangerous. The capital must be informed." He turned to run, but Uldric moved with inhuman speed, catching the man by the collar and lifting him off his feet. Aldrin let out a strangled cry, his face going pale. "Please," Uldric said, his voice like winter frost. "Tell your masters that the Alpha King has returned. Tell them their lies and treachery will be answered. Tell them I am coming." He released Aldrin, who stumbled and fell, scrambling backward in terror. "And Aldrin," Nisara added, her voice cold. "Tell them that if they wish to stop me, they will have to kill me, because I will not abandon the truth no matter the cost." Aldrin fled, disappearing into the forest. Uldric turned to Nisara, his expression grave. "The die is cast. They will come for us now." "Let them come," Nisara said, moving to stand beside him. "We have truth on our side, and we have each other." Uldric pulled her close, pressing a fierce kiss to her forehead. "Then we prepare for war." They worked through the day and into the night, gathering evidence, copying documents, preparing for the battle ahead. Nisara sent coded messages to scholars she trusted, asking them to research the old bloodlines, to verify the claims in the journal they had found. Uldric trained, honing skills that had lain dormant for centuries, his body remembering the warrior he had been. 3 days later, the first attack came. Nisara woke to the sound of the wards shattering. Uldric was already moving, pulling her from the bed and pushing her toward the back of the cottage. "Go," he commanded. "There is a passage beneath the cellar. It leads to the forest. Take the documents and run." "I will not leave you," Nisara protested, but Uldric's eyes flashed with amber fire. "You will do as I say. I will not risk you. Go now, and I will find you when this is done." The door burst open, and soldiers poured in, armed with steel and magic. Uldric roared, a sound that shook the very walls, and threw himself into battle. Nisara watched in horrified awe as he fought, moving with brutal efficiency, every strike precise and lethal. He was magnificent and terrifying, a force of nature unleashed. But there were too many. Even as Uldric cut through them, more poured in, and Nisara realized with horror that they carried runic chains, the same kind that had bound him in the tomb. She made a decision in that instant. Abandoning the escape route, she grabbed the heaviest tome she could find and brought it crashing down on the nearest soldier's head. He went down hard, and she snatched his sword, turning to face the others. "Nisara, no!" Uldric shouted, but she was already moving. She had no formal training, but desperation and adrenaline made her fierce. She fought with wild determination, protecting Uldric's flank, preventing them from surrounding him. Together they fought, a perfect unit, anticipating each other's movements, as if they had battled side by side for years. When the last soldier fell, they stood among the wreckage of her cottage, breathing hard, covered in blood and ash. Uldric turned to her, his expression a mix of fury and admiration. "I told you to run," he said, his voice rough. "And I told you I would not leave you," Nisara replied, lifting her chin. "We are in this together, Uldric, for better or worse." He crossed to her in 3 strides and kissed her hard, pouring all his fear and relief and love into that kiss. When they parted, his hands were shaking. "If anything happened to you," he said hoarsely, "if they had harmed you, I would have burned the world to ash. They did not harm me, and they will not, because you are with me, and I am with you." They fled the cottage, taking only what they could carry. As they disappeared into the forest, smoke rose from the ruined building, a signal to all who would see that the war had begun. For weeks they moved through the shadows, traveling from village to village, gathering allies. Nisara's reputation as a scholar opened doors, and Uldric's presence, once revealed, inspired both fear and hope. The old noble houses, those who had never fully accepted the current rulers, began to rally to his cause. But it was not easy. There were those who tried to kill them, assassins sent by the capital. There were nights when they went hungry, days when they traveled until their feet bled. Yet through it all, they had each other, and that made all the difference. Uldric was changed by the journey. The hard, bitter king who had emerged from the tomb was gone, replaced by a leader who inspired loyalty through honor rather than fear. He listened to Nisara's counsel, valued the opinions of those who joined them, and showed mercy when he could. He was becoming the king he was always meant to be. And Nisara was changing too. She was no longer the solitary scholar, content with books and solitude. She had found purpose beyond knowledge, had discovered that she was capable of courage and strength she had never imagined. With Uldric, she was becoming the woman she was meant to be. Their love deepened with every passing day. In stolen moments between battles and strategy sessions, they would find time to simply be together. Uldric would hold her through the night, his arms a fortress against the world. Nisara would trace the scars on his body, each one a story, a piece of history written in flesh. They made love under the stars, their passion fierce and tender, a celebration of life in the face of death. Uldric was impossibly gentle with her, treating her as if she were made of glass even as she proved herself to be made of steel. He worshipped her body with a reverence that made her weep, whispered words of love and devotion that she had never thought to hear. With the world, he was the Alpha King, terrifying and uncompromising. But with her, he was simply Uldric, the man who loved her with every fiber of his being. 6 months after their flight from the cottage, they stood at the head of an army. The old noble houses had joined them, bringing their warriors and their loyalty. Evidence of the ancient conspiracy had been spread throughout the kingdom, sowing seeds of doubt about the current rulers. The people were ready for change, ready for the return of their true king. The journey to this moment had been arduous, filled with trials that tested not just their strength, but their bond. There had been a night, 3 months into their campaign, when Uldric had nearly been killed by a poisoned blade. Nisara had stayed by his side for 5 days and nights as he fought the toxin, refusing to leave even as he burned with fever and thrashed in delirium. She had held his hand, whispered ancient healing prayers she had found in forgotten texts, and willed him to live with every fiber of her being. When he had finally opened his eyes, weak but alive, the first word from his lips had been her name. Nisara. "I am here," she had said, tears streaming down her face. "I am here, my love." He had pulled her down to him, his arms trembling with exhaustion, but still strong enough to hold her. "I heard you," he had whispered. "In the darkness, I heard your voice calling me back. You saved me again. And I will save you 1,000 times more if I must," she had replied fiercely. You are mine, Uldric Dravenmore, and I do not surrender what is mine." That moment had changed something between them. The bond had deepened into something unbreakable, forged in fire and trial. They were not simply lovers anymore. They were bonded, their souls intertwined in ways that transcended the physical. There had been other trials. A noble house that had betrayed them, attempting to sell information to the capital in exchange for favor. Uldric's rage had been terrible to behold, and for a moment, Nisara had seen the king the legends described, the fearsome alpha who could destroy with a thought. But she had stepped forward, placed her hand on his arm, and said simply, "Remember who you are. Remember who you want to be." And Uldric had listened. He had punished the traitors, yes, but with exile rather than execution, showing the mercy that separated him from those who had imprisoned him. Word of his restraint had spread, and more had flocked to his banner, seeing in him a leader worth following. Through every challenge, every setback, every small victory, Nisara had been there. She had become his anchor, the calm center in the storm of his existence. And he had become her strength, the warrior who stood between her and all harm, who fought so that she could work, who protected so that she could build. They had forged alliances in the most unlikely places. A group of forest-dwelling mages who still practiced the old ways had joined them, bringing their considerable power to bear. A merchant guild, tired of the corruption in the capital, had funded their campaign. And common folk, those who had suffered under unjust rule, had risen up, bringing food, supplies, and their fierce determination to see justice done. The night before the final battle, Uldric and Nisara had stood together under the stars, knowing that tomorrow might bring death for one or both of them. The army was camped around them, thousands of souls depending on their leadership, believing in their cause. "Are you afraid?" Nisara had asked, her hand clasped tightly in his. "Terrified," Uldric had admitted, something he would never have confessed to anyone but her. "Not of death, but of losing you. Of failing these people who have placed their faith in us. Of becoming the monster I was accused of being." Nisara had turned to face him, reaching up to cup his bearded face in her hands. "You could never be that monster. Do you know why? Because you care. Because you question yourself. Because you have a heart capable of love and fear and hope. Monsters do not worry about becoming monsters, Uldric. Only good men do." He had kissed her then, pouring all his love and fear and desperate hope into that kiss. And when they had made love that night, beneath the watchful stars, it had been with a tenderness and passion that spoke of possible goodbyes and eternal promises. "If I fall tomorrow," Uldric had said afterward, holding her close, "promise me you will continue. Promise me you will see this through, that you will tell the truth, no matter what happens to me." "You will not fall," Nisara had said fiercely. "I will not allow it. We will win this together, Uldric. Together." And now, as the dawn broke over the battlefield, they stood side by side, ready to face their destiny. The capital city rose before them, its white walls gleaming in the early light. Between them and those walls stood an army, thousands strong, loyal to the false king. Uldric raised his sword, and his voice rang out across the field, carrying with a power that was both natural and supernatural, the voice of an alpha king. "People of the realm, I am Uldric Dravenmore, your rightful king, returned from unjust imprisonment to reclaim what was stolen. I do not come as a conqueror, but as a liberator. The lies you have been told about me are false, and I have proof of the treachery that led to my downfall. I offer you a choice. Stand with me and help build a kingdom of truth and justice, or stand aside and let history judge where you placed your loyalty on this day." There was a moment of silence, heavy and expectant. Then, from within the opposing army, a soldier stepped forward. He removed his helmet and knelt, laying down his sword. "I stand with the true king," he shouted. Another followed, then another. Like a wave spreading through the ranks, soldiers began to kneel, began to lay down their weapons. Not all, but enough. Enough to show that the tide was turning, that the truth was resonating. The false king, seeing his army fracturing, gave the command to attack. Those still loyal to him charged forward, and the battlefield erupted into chaos. Steel clashed against steel, magic crackled through the air, and the very ground seemed to tremble with the force of the conflict. Nisara fought with a fury born of love and purpose. She was not the most skilled warrior, but she was clever, using magic she had learned from ancient texts to confuse and disorient her opponents. And always, Uldric was there, his presence a shield at her back, his power clearing the way before her. Together, they cut through the battlefield like a force of nature. Uldric was magnificent, every movement precise and deadly, his sword an extension of his will. But what struck those who witnessed him was not just his prowess, but his honor. He killed only when necessary, disarmed when he could, and when opponents surrendered, he accepted, sparing their lives. This was not the tyrant of legend. This was a king worthy of his crown. The battle raged for hours, the sun climbing high, and then beginning its descent. Blood soaked the earth, screams of the dying mixed with the clash of weapons, and the air grew thick with smoke and magic. Nisara's arms ached, her lungs burned, but she fought on, driven by the knowledge that everything they had worked for came down to this moment. Finally, at the height of the battle, Uldric came face to face with his cousin's descendant, King Uldric III, a man who bore his ancestors' name and his treachery. The false king was skilled, wielding magic and steel with equal prowess, his power amplified by artifacts he had no right to possess. Royal regalia that had been Uldric's, crowns and scepters infused with ancient magic, turned against their rightful owner. The duel that followed was epic, a clash of old and new, of rightful claim against unjust possession. They fought across the battlefield, their power so great that others gave them wide berth, creating a circle of empty space around the two kings. Uldric fought with controlled fury, each strike calculated, each movement efficient. But Uldric fought with desperation, knowing that defeat meant not just the loss of his crown, but the exposure of his lineage's greatest shame. He threw everything at Uldric, magic that scorched the earth, strikes that would have felled a lesser warrior. But Uldric was no lesser warrior. He was the Alpha King, awakened and righteous in his cause. He countered every attack, weathered every strike, and slowly, inexorably, drove Uldric back. Nisara watched, her heart in her throat, as the two men who claimed the same throne battled for supremacy. She saw the moment Uldric's guard faltered, saw Uldric's opening, saw the strike that would end it all. But Uldric did not kill him. Instead, with a movement so fast it seemed like magic, he disarmed Uldric, sending the false king's sword spinning through the air. Uldric's blade came to rest against Uldric's throat, not cutting, but present, undeniable. The battlefield grew quiet. All eyes turned to the two kings, one kneeling, one standing victorious. "Yield," Uldric commanded, his voice carrying across the field. "Yield, and I will show you the mercy my cousin never showed me. I will spare your life, though you wear a crown built on lies. I will let you live to see what a true king's justice looks like." Uldric looked up at Uldric, and in his eyes, Nisara saw not just defeat, but recognition. Recognition that he had never been the man this returned king was, that his crown had always been hollow, his claim always false. "I yield," Uldric said, his voice breaking. "I yield to the true king." He knelt formally, removing his crown and holding it out to Uldric. But Uldric did not take it immediately. Instead, he reached down and pulled Uldric to his feet, looking him in the eyes. "You are not your ancestor," Uldric said, loud enough for all to hear. You inherited his lies, but you do not have to carry his sins. I will judge you on your own actions, not those of the man who came 3 centuries before you. Tell me true. Did you know of the conspiracy? Did you perpetuate it knowingly? Aldrich's face crumpled. I learned the truth 5 years ago, when I found the same journal your queen discovered. I knew my crown was built on betrayal, but I was too weak, too afraid to give it up. I am guilty not of creating the lie, but of allowing it to continue. For that, I deserve whatever judgment you see fit. Aldrich studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Honesty, even when it costs you everything, has value. You will not be executed. You will not be imprisoned as I was. But you will help me rebuild what your family broke. You will use your knowledge of the current nobility, the current political structure, to smooth the transition of power. You will make amends through service. A murmur of surprise rippled through the gathered armies. Such mercy was unexpected, revolutionary, but it was exactly what the kingdom needed. Not more bloodshed, not more vengeance, but a new way forward. Aldrich knelt again, this time in genuine fealty. I swear it, Your Majesty. I will serve as you command. Aldrich finally took the crown from Aldrich's hands, but he did not place it on his own head. Instead, he turned and walked to where Nisara stood, her white hair catching the golden light of the setting sun, her face streaked with ash and tears. He knelt before her, and the entire battlefield seemed to hold its breath. Nisara Thornwick, he said, his voice rich with emotion. You freed me from my tomb. You stood beside me when all others would have fled. You fought for truth when lies were easier. You showed me that strength without compassion is tyranny, that power without love is emptiness. You saved me, not just from stone and darkness, but from becoming the very thing they accused me of being. I cannot rule without you. I will not rule without you. Be my queen. Not because I command it, but because I love you with every breath in my body. Be my partner, my equal, my heart. Rule beside me and help me build a kingdom worthy of the truth you value so highly. Tears streamed freely down Nisara's face as she looked down at this fierce, powerful king, kneeling before her in full view of his army. Vulnerable and open in a way that defied every expectation of what an alpha should be. Yes, she said, her voice carrying clear and strong across the field. Yes, I will be your queen. I will stand beside you, rule beside you, love you for all my days. You are my heart, Aldrich Dravenmore. Rise, my king, and let us build this kingdom together. Aldrich rose, and before the assembled armies, before the watching nobility, before the gods themselves, he kissed his queen. It was a kiss that sealed a vow, that proclaimed a love, that promised a future built on truth and partnership. When they parted, Aldrich held the crown high, and his voice rang out once more. Behold your queen, Nisara the Wise, keeper of truth, breaker of chains, she who awakened your king and will help shape your future. Honor her as you honor me, for we are one. A great cheer rose from the assembled forces, a roar of approval and joy that seemed to shake the very heavens. The battle was over. The war was won, and a new era was beginning. That evening, as the sun set over the capital in shades of gold and crimson, Aldrich Dravenmore reclaimed his throne. The great hall of the palace, which had stood empty of its true king for over 3 centuries, was filled to capacity. Lords and ladies, soldiers and common folk, all gathered to witness history being made. The hall itself was magnificent, carved from white marble veined with gold, its ceiling painted with scenes from the old legends. Aldrich had stood in this very room 333 years ago, had ruled from this throne before treachery had stolen everything from him. As he walked down the central aisle, Nisara at his side, he felt the weight of history pressing down on him, the ghosts of the past watching to see what he would do with this second chance. But he was not the same man who had been sealed away. That man had been alone isolated by power and position. This man had Nisara, had learned what it meant to be truly known and loved. That made all the difference. They ascended the steps to the throne together, hand in hand, and turned to face the assembled crowd. Uldric wore robes of deep blue trimmed with silver, ancient regalia that had been recovered from the vaults where they had been hidden. On his head sat the crown that was rightfully his, but it was Nisara who drew the eye. She stood in robes of white and red, the colors of her hair and her dress from that first night, colors that had come to symbolize purity of purpose and fierce determination. Her white hair was unbound, falling like a cascade of moonlight over her shoulders. She wore no crown yet, but she carried herself with a regal bearing that needed no such symbols. "People of the realm," Uldric began, his voice filling the hall with natural authority. "Today marks not just the restoration of a king, but the birth of a new era. The lies that have governed for 3 centuries end here. The truth, in all its messy complexity, begins now. I do not come before you as a perfect ruler. I am a man who has been broken and remade, who has learned that power without wisdom is tyranny, that strength without compassion is cruelty. I have learned these lessons through the woman who stands beside me." He turned to Nisara, his eyes soft with love despite the formality of the occasion. "Nisara Thornwick found me in darkness and chose to bring me into light. She could have fled when I awakened. She could have let others deal with the consequences of breaking my seal. But she stayed. She helped me understand this new world. She fought beside me, bled beside me, stood firm when I faltered. She is the reason I stand before you, not as a vengeful specter seeking to reclaim power, but as a king who wishes to serve his people with honor." He took her hand, raising it high. "This woman freed me from my tomb. She deciphered the runes that had been meant to hold me forever. In doing so, she did not just awaken a king. She awakened the possibility of a better future. And so, before the gods and before all of you, I declare Nisara Thornwick to be my queen, not simply as consort, but as co-ruler. Her wisdom will guide our policies. Her knowledge will shape our future. Her compassion will temper my strength. Together, we will rebuild what was broken and create something new and beautiful from the ashes of the old." An elderly priestess, one of the few who still practiced the old rites, came forward bearing a crown. It was ancient, recovered from the same vaults as Uldric's regalia, silver worked into intricate patterns of runes and stars, set with moonstones that seemed to glow with inner light. It had been the crown of the first queen, crafted when the kingdom was young. Uldric took the crown, but before he could place it on Nisara's head, she spoke, her clear voice ringing through the hall. "Before I accept this crown, I have something to say." She turned to face the assembled crowd, her pale eyes fierce with conviction. "I am not of noble birth. I have no claim to this throne by blood or tradition. I am a scholar, an orphan raised in dusty archives, a woman who spent her life alone because I valued truth over comfort. Some of you may question whether I am fit to be your queen. And to that, I say this. I do not claim to be perfect. But I promise you that I will never lie to you. I will never hide truth to make power easier to grasp. I will work every day to earn the title I am being given, to prove through action that wisdom and integrity have value in leadership. And I will stand beside this man, this king who was wronged and yet chooses mercy. And I will help him build a kingdom worthy of the sacrifice so many have made to see this day come to pass." The hall erupted in applause. Even those who had harbored doubts found themselves moved by her honesty, by her refusal to claim more than her due, while simultaneously demonstrating exactly why she deserved the crown. Uldric placed the crown on her head, and as he did, something magical happened. The moonstones flared with light, responding to Nisara in a way they had not responded to any queen in living memory. It was as if the crown itself recognized her, accepted her, blessed her claim. "Behold," the priestess proclaimed, "the gods themselves approve this union. The stars have aligned, the old magic stirs, and a new age begins." Uldric and Nisara stood before their people, king and queen, partners in all things. And when Uldric leaned down to kiss his queen, sealing their vows before gods and witnesses, the hall erupted once more in celebration. That night, after the feasting and speeches had ended, after the last nobles had offered their congratulations, and the crowds had finally dispersed, Uldric and Nisara stood alone in the royal chambers. It was a vast room, opulent and beautiful, but Uldric barely saw it. He only had eyes for Nisara. She stood by the window, looking out over the city, her crown catching the moonlight. Uldric approached slowly, wrapping his arms around her from behind, pulling her back against his chest. "What are you thinking?" he murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I am thinking about how strange life is," Nisara replied, leaning into his embrace. 6 months ago, I was a solitary scholar with no ambitions beyond understanding ancient texts. Now I am a queen, responsible for the welfare of thousands. It is overwhelming. "You will be magnificent," Uldric said with absolute certainty. "You already are. Did you see how the people responded to you? They love you, Nisara, not because I chose you, but because they recognize your worth." "And you?" Nisara asked softly, turning in his arms to face him. "Do you have regrets? I know you loved someone once, before your imprisonment. Do you wish it were her standing beside you now?" Uldric's expression grew tender. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing across her cheekbones. "I did love once, long ago, but that was a different man in a different time. That love, whatever it was, cannot compare to what I feel for you. You know me, Nisara. You know the darkness in me, the capacity for violence, the rage that still simmers beneath the surface. And yet you love me anyway. You do not love the crown or the power. You love the man. That is something I never had before, something I never thought I would have. So no, my heart, I have no regrets. You are exactly who I need, exactly who I choose, now and forever." He kissed her then. And it was not the formal kiss of the coronation. It was raw and passionate, a claiming and a surrender all at once. Nisara responded with equal fervor, her hands fisting in his hair, pulling him closer. When they finally parted, both breathing hard, Uldric rested his forehead against hers. "I need you," he said roughly. "Not as my queen, though you are that. Not as my advisor, though you are that too. I need you as a man needs the air he breathes. You are essential to my existence, Nisara. Without you, I am just a warrior, a weapon. With you, I am whole." Tears slipped down Nisara's cheeks, but they were tears of joy. "I love you," she said simply. "I love you with everything I am. And I will stand beside you through whatever comes, for the rest of our days." They made love that night with a tenderness that belied the passion beneath. Uldric worshipped every inch of Nisara's skin, took his time bringing her to the edge and back again, savoring every gasp, every moan, every shuddering breath. He was achingly gentle, treating her like the precious treasure she was, even as the primal part of him growled with the need to claim, to mark, to bind her to him in every way possible. And Nisara met him with equal intensity, giving herself to him completely, holding nothing back. She traced the scars on his body, each one a story of survival, and loved every imperfection. She whispered words of adoration against his skin, told him without shame how much she desired him, needed him, loved him. When they finally came together, it was with a synchronicity that spoke of souls perfectly matched. They moved as one, two halves of a whole finally and fully united. And when release came, it was shattering. a climax so intense that for a moment, the world itself seemed to pause in recognition of what they had created together. Afterward, they lay tangled together, sweat-slicked and sated, Nisara's head pillowed on Uldric's chest, his arms wrapped securely around her. His heartbeat was a steady drum beneath her ear, a sound that had become more home to her than any place ever could. "Promise me something," Nisara said softly into the darkness. "Anything," Uldric replied, his hand stroking through her hair. "Promise me that no matter how difficult ruling becomes, no matter what challenges we face, you will always come back to this, to us, to the truth of what we are together. Do not let the crown change you, Uldric. Do not let power corrupt what we have built." Uldric was quiet for a moment, considering her words seriously. "I promise," he finally said. "You are my anchor, Nisara. When the weight of the crown threatens to crush me, when the demands of ruling make me forget who I am, you will remind me. That is why I need you beside me on that throne. Not just because you are wise or kind or brilliant, though you are all those things, but because you see me, truly see me, and you will not let me lose myself." "And you will do the same for me," Nisara said. "You will remind me that compassion without strength is weakness, that sometimes hard choices must be made. We will balance each other, support each other, keep each other honest and true." "Yes," Uldric agreed. "We will be better together than we could ever be apart." They held each other through the night, two souls who had found each other against impossible odds, who had fought through darkness and emerged into light. And as the moon rose high over the kingdom, casting silver light through the windows, they knew that this was only the beginning. Their reign would be long and prosperous. Nisara's knowledge and Uldric's strength would rebuild what had been lost, would create something new and beautiful from the ashes of the old. They would face challenges, enemies, hardships, but they would face them together, always together. For Nisara had deciphered the ancient runes in the tomb, unaware she was awakening the Alpha King after 333 years. But more than that, she had awakened love, had found purpose, had discovered that the greatest magic of all was not written in symbols on stone, but forged in the connection between two hearts. And so their story became legend. The scholar and the king, the woman who sought truth and the man who reclaimed his destiny. Together, they ruled with wisdom and compassion, their love a beacon that inspired all who knew their tale. In the great library Nisara built, their story was recorded in careful script, preserved for future generations. It spoke of betrayal and redemption, of darkness and light, of loneliness transformed into love. It was a story of how one woman's courage changed the fate of a kingdom, how one king's heart was healed by an unlikely savior. But above all, it was a love story. The kind that transcends time, that survives imprisonment and war, that burns eternal. And when Nisara lay in Uldric's arms, feeling his heart beat steady and strong against her back, she knew that she had found her home. Not in a cottage in the gray valleys, not in dusty archives or ancient tombs, but here, in the embrace of the man she loved. "Tell me again," she whispered into the darkness. "Tell me how you fell in love with me." Uldric's arms tightened around her, and she could hear the smile in his voice when he spoke. "I fell in love with you the moment you refused to fear me. I fell in love with your brilliance, your courage, your stubborn refusal to accept lies. I fell in love with the way you looked at me, not as a monster or a king, but as a man. I fell in love with every word, every touch, every moment we shared. And I fall in love with you more deeply with each passing day." Nisara turned in his embrace, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that was soft and sweet and filled with promise. "And I fell in love with you," she said, The moment you showed me that strength and gentleness could exist in the same heart. I fell in love with your honor, your pain, your determination to reclaim not just your throne, but your truth. I fell in love with the way you see me, truly see me, in a way no one ever has. I fell in love with the man behind the legend. They made love again, slowly this time, savoring every touch, every sigh, every moment of connection. And when they finally slept, it was with the deep contentment of two souls who had found their perfect match. Years passed. The kingdom flourished under their rule. Nisara's scholars worked alongside Uldric's warriors, knowledge and strength united in purpose. The old ways were honored even as new innovations were embraced. It was a golden age, a time of peace and prosperity that would be remembered for generations. And through it all, Uldric and Nisara remained devoted to each other. Their love did not fade with time, but grew deeper, richer, more complex. They learned each other's rhythms, anticipated each other's needs, became so intertwined that it was impossible to imagine one without the other. Uldric ruled with Nisara's wisdom, tempering his strength. When he would have been harsh, she showed him mercy. When she would have been too trusting, he protected her. They were perfect complements, two halves creating a greater whole. And in the quiet moments, away from the demands of the kingdom, they were simply two people in love. Uldric would read to Nisara from ancient texts, his deep voice bringing the words to life. Nisara would paint intricate runes on Uldric's skin, protective magic woven with love. They would walk through the gardens hand in hand, or dance in their chambers to music only they could hear. The courtiers spoke of them in awed whispers. The fierce Alpha King who had returned from death itself, who could silence a room with a single look, who commanded absolute respect from his warriors, transformed in the presence of his queen. With Nisara, he was gentle, attentive, devoted. He looked at her as if she were the sun and stars, as if her happiness was the only thing that mattered in all the world. And Nisara, who had spent her life alone and content with that solitude, bloomed under Uldric's love. She became confident, radiant, a queen beloved by her people for her wisdom and kindness. She stood beside Uldric at state functions, her presence grounding him, reminding him of the man he wanted to be. They never forgot where they had come from. The tomb in the mountains was preserved as a monument, a reminder of the price of betrayal and the power of truth. Nisara's ruined cottage was rebuilt, turned into a sanctuary for scholars seeking knowledge, and in the great hall of the palace, above the throne, hung a single rune, the same one Nisara had deciphered that fateful night. It was the symbol for awakening. On quiet nights, when the kingdom slept and the moon shone bright, Uldric and Nisara would stand on the balcony of their chambers, looking out over the land they had fought so hard to claim. And Uldric would pull Nisara close, burying his face in her white hair, breathing in her scent, marveling at the miracle of her existence. "Do you know what you saved me from?" he would ask, his voice rough with emotion. "Tell me," Nisara would reply, though she had heard the answer 1,000 times. "Not just from the tomb, not just from darkness and isolation. You saved me from becoming the monster they claimed I was. You gave me a reason to be gentle, to be kind, to use my strength for protection rather than destruction. You saved my soul, Nisara. You gave me a reason to live again." And Nisara would turn in his arms, her pale eyes reflecting starlight, and say the words that were always true. "And you saved me from a life half-lived. You showed me that knowledge alone is not enough, that connection and love give meaning to existence. You made me believe I was worthy of devotion, capable of courage. You gave me a home, not in a place, but in your heart. We saved each other, my love, as we will continue to save each other, every day, for the rest of our lives." They would kiss then, under the watching stars, Two souls bound by fate and choice, and love so deep it transcended time itself. And the kingdom would sleep peacefully, knowing their king and queen stood watch, united and eternal. This was the story of Nisara Thornwick and Uldric Dravenmore, the scholar who sought truth and the king who reclaimed his destiny. It was a story of awakening, not just from physical imprisonment, but from the prisons of loneliness and fear. It was a story of how love can transform, redeem, and heal even the deepest wounds. And it was a story that would be told for centuries to come, inspiring all who heard it to believe in the power of connection, the strength of truth, and the magic of finding that one soul who sees you, truly sees you, and loves you all the more for it. For in the end, Nisara had not just deciphered ancient runes. She had deciphered the heart of an Alpha King, had unlocked the love that had lain dormant within him, waiting for the right person to set it free. And Uldric had not just awakened from 333 years of darkness. He had awakened to love, to purpose, to the knowledge that even immortal beings need connection to truly live. Together they ruled. Together they loved. Together, they created a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. A testament to the truth that the greatest power in the world is not magic or strength or knowledge, but love. The kind of love that awakens, transforms, and endures. The kind of love that makes life worth living, no matter how long that life may be. And so ends the tale of the Alpha King and his queen, the man who slept for centuries, and the woman who woke him with her courage, her brilliance, and her heart. May their story remind us all that it is never too late to awaken, never too late to love, and never too late to find the one person who makes us whole. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this beautiful love story. Let us know what you thought of this tale full of emotions and surprises. Tell us your name, where you're watching from, and rate this story from 0 to 10 if it touched your heart. And if you enjoyed the plot, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the amazing new stories coming soon. See you next time.